Nightbirds on Nantucket by Joan Aiken, Chapter 8, Captain Casket's Illness, Dido Sees the Doctor, The Professor in the Bog, An Abominable Plot, Aunt Tribulation Overhears. To Dido's surprise and concern, there were still lights burning in the farm as she approached. Surely it was long past the usual hour for bedtime. Did this mean that Aunt Tribulation had seen through Penn's story of the straying yellow cow and was waiting up to conduct an inquiry? When Dido walked into the kitchen, however, she saw at once that the usual wakefulness was not on her account. The stove was roaring. A large black kettle steamed. Penn was anxiously heating a poultice, while Aunt Tribulation, with a grim expression, aired blankets, nightcaps, and chest protectors before the fire. "Oh, Dido!" Penn exclaimed. "Papa is dreadfully unwell. He is in a fever. I've tried him with everything, balsam and cordial and rheumatic pills, but none of them did him any good. He tosses and turns so, and throws off the bedclothes. He seems to think he is in a boat." "Did you find the cow, miss?" Aunt Tribulation snapped at Dido. "She's in the barn," Dido replied. "Do you think we should get a doctor?" she says to Penn. "Oh, I do. Would you go for one, Dido?" "A doctor will hardly thank you for fetching him out at this hour," Aunt Tribulation remarked sourly. "Here, miss, take these things up to your father. I'm going to bed. I've done all that can be expected in my delicate state of health." "Isn't she perfectly hateful?" Penn whispered when Aunt Tribulation had departed. "She doesn't seem to care a bit about poor Papa. As for her delicate state of health, I don't believe there was ever a thing wrong with her." Penn was distractedly looking through the store cupboard in search of more reminders. "What's in this jar? Can you read the label, Dido? It's dear Mamma's tiniest writing. I can't make it out." Impatiently, she rubbed the tears from her eyes. "Oh, Dido, supposing Papa were to die!" "We shan't suppose any such nonsense," Dido said firmly. "Huckleberries in gin, this is. Smells like stingo stuff. Try them on him, Penny. See if he likes them." They hurried upstairs with the warm clothes and the poultice, the pot of huckleberries, and a stone jar full of boiling water for the captain's feet. It was very difficult to get him wrapped up and poulticed. As Penn had said, he kept throwing himself about, crying, "Towno, Towno, allow from aloft, I'm all beset, bring to. Give it to her, she's pitching. Her spiracles under, stem all, we're stove." He sprang up in bed, and the poultice flew across the room. "Never mind the dreaded poultice," Dido said at last in exasperation. "It's all cold and dusty by now anyways. Here, you hold his hands a moment while I try to slip some of these huckleberries down him. Hold tight." Penn held on manfully. "Papa, don't you know me?" she pleaded. "It's penitence." "There she blows!" shouted Captain Casket. But as he kept his mouth open to prolong the bellow, Dido neatly popped in a spoonful of the huckleberries. The captain immediately shut his mouth. He swallowed. A surprised expression came over his face. "Quick! Quick, another spoonful," whispered Penn. When Dido raised the spoon again, he opened his mouth eagerly, and she was able to feed him the rest of the potful without difficulty. He murmured to himself, "Truly, it has been a wonderful summer for fruit. Wonderful, we must all—" His eyelids fluttered, and he suddenly fell back on the pillow, fast asleep. "That's a mussy," Dido said. "Now let's snug him up warm, and then as soon as it's light, Penn, I'll go for the doctor. Do you know his name?" "I think it's Dr. Mayhew," Penn said doubtfully. "Anyone in Nantucket town would be able to tell you." They wedged the captain about with hot bottles and laid several comforters on him. Penn sat down by him, anxiously holding his hand. Since her father had come home, needing her help, Penn was a changed creature. She seemed to have thrown aside her needless fears and become quite practical and self-reliant. Dido busied herself in tidying the room and removing the unwanted poultice. It did not seem worth trying to sleep, as there wanted but an hour to daylight. Instead, she milked the cows and harnessed Mungo. As she went indoors again, a pink streak was showing in the eastern sky. She tiptoed up to the captain's room and found that he was beginning to stir and mutter again. He half opened his eyes and stared dreamily out the window. "Why," he whispered, "it's a little white calf, no more than a sucker, washed up on quiet beach. The pretty little thing, it's as pink as a wild rose. I won't tell my father, it's too pretty to hurt." I'll put it back in the sea. There you are, little Pinkin. Swim away back to your mother. Dido had found another jar of huckleberries. She silently passed it to Pen, who managed to feed a few of them to the captain, and he went back to sleep. Dido then gave Pen a brief account of her meeting with the little man in the wood, to which Pen listened somewhat distractedly. Most of her attention was on her father. "I'm off now, dutiful," Dido whispered. "I'll be as quick as I can." Pen nodded. Dido ran down, jumped into the waiting cart, shook up the reins, and started Mungo at a rattling pace toward Nantucket. One thing, she thought, it's nice to get into town for a bit, even if it ain't London. I hope Auntie Trib don't give poor Pen the runaround while I'm gone. Likely she'll sleep a good while yet, as she was up so late. The day was a fine one, and her spirits rose. Dawn had flooded the upland commons with a ruddy light, and a crimson and distant line of the sea. Old Rosie would look just the thing out there now, Dido said to herself. For the first time, she recalled Nate's strange tale of how the pink whale had seemed to welcome Captain Casket. A rummy business altogether, Dido reflected. Mungo was suffering from several days' lack of exercise and bolted along so fast that when they descended the gentle incline into Nantucket town, it was still quite early. Not many people were about in the cobbled streets. Dido bore right toward the waterfront and left Mungo tethered to a post in Whale Street while she asked her way on foot. Old Doc Mayhew," said a fisherman on the wharf. "He lives on Orange Street. That ain't but a few minutes from here." The doctor lived up on a hill in a handsome white house, Quaker style, with a fanlight and 3 windows on each floor. Dido banged loudly on the door and told the housekeeper that Dr. Mayhew was wanted urgently. "He ain't taken but a mouthful of breakfast. Could you wait 10 minutes? "Oh, well, I guess Captain Casket won't die in that time," Dido agreed. She was dying for some breakfast herself and strolled back looking for a baker's shop, but was soon startled by a familiar voice calling in the next street. "In the spring of the year when the blood is too thick, there's nothing so good as a sassafras stick. Who'll buy my stick candy so nice and so dandy? Pickled limes, jelly, doughnuts, come snap 'em up quick." "Nate!" Dido exclaimed, and ran into Main Street, where she found Nate making his way slowly along in a small pony cart laden with trays of delicacies presumably made by Mrs. Pardon. "Hello, chick," he said when he saw her, and then filled his lungs again and shouted, "I've several different kinds of pickled tamarinds. Try my pickled bananas, walk up, take your pick. Try my licorice roots, worth $1 a lick." A number of housewives came to their doors and bought his wares, which included donuts, biscuits, and waffles. "Try my lemony wintergrass, sassafras, peppermint, superfine candy, a penny a stick." Children came running for the dazzlingly colored candy sticks he called popcorn and peanuts and pecans and popovers, wintergreen wafers and hermits and jumbles, ginger snaps, crullers, marshmallows and turnovers. Sample a cookie and see how it crumbles. Dido bought some popovers and found them delicious. "Nate, have you thought about what we ought to do yet?" she asked when there was a momentary lull in the stream of customers. "Yes," he said, glancing about. "I've thought. We must tell the mayor. Likely he won't be so keen to have a mess of Hanoverian English flooding on his island." "That sounds like sense. What's the mayor's name and where does he live?" "It's old Doc Mayhew. He lives on Orange Street." "Why?" Dido exclaimed. "I'm just a-going to fetch him to come and see Captain Casket, who's got the raving fevers. Couldn't be more handy. I'll tell him the whole tale as we drive home." "Oh, that's bully. I'll get this lot sold off and come along to your place later. Ma said as how I was to help you and Pen with the chores when I'd finished selling." Dido nodded, and as the doctor might be supposed to have finished his breakfast by now, she unclinched Mungo and drove back to Orange Street, where she found him waiting. Dr. Mayhew was a fine-looking old gentleman with white hair and a frill of white whiskers all round his face, so that he looked rather like an ox-eyed daisy. He wore a green coat with brass buttons as big as $50 and a snowy white ruffled shirt. "Hello," he said at the sight of Dido. "You're a young 'un. I've never laid eyes on before. Didn't he bring you into the world? Living out at the casket place, are ye?" That's it, Dido agreed. I'm staying there, keeping young Pen Casket company till she's gotten used to her auntie Tribulation. Tribulation Casket? Has she come back to live on the island? Why, I haven't set eyes on her since she was a young thing of 15. Oh, Dido was disappointed. Guess you'll find that she's changed a bit then. Lively young girl she used to be, the doctor said reminiscently. Always one for a song and a bit of dancing or horseback riding. Croupice, said Dido. She ain't like that now, Doc Mayhew. Can I ask you something? Why, certainly, my child. Now, how can I help you? Well, you see, it's like this, Doc. There's a whole parcel of... Excuse me. Parcel of Hanoverian plotters on Nantucket, and we think Miss Casket is one of them. Hanoverians? Dr. Mayhew seemed somewhat bewildered. Yes, sir. English Hanoverians. They're all plotting against the English king. Dr. Mayhew laughed heartily. Why, child, what an imagination you have. It's true, Dido said indignantly. I ain't bamming you. Why, child, even if you were right, what harm could they do to the English king over here? That sounds like pure fancifulness to me. They've got a gun, Dido said stubbornly. They're all camping in the hidden forest, except for Miss Casket, that is. And they've got a mighty great gun about a mile long. Oh, my child, I have heard of those men. They are scientists, and that is not a gun, but a telescope. Quite a natural mistake to make. I believe they are ornithologists studying our bird life. Somebody said they wished to see a black-crowned night heron. English ornithologists, that's all they are. Ornithologists be blowed, said Dido. Orny jailbirds is what they are, and they're here to do some piece of skullduggery. We heard 'em plotting it the other night in the woods. Then they'll go back to England on their ship, the Dark Diamond. That's all right, then, said Dr. Mayhew comfortably. And a good riddance to 'em. Whether jailbirds or bird fanciers, we've got no call to worry our heads about a pack of foreign English, even if they do put a bit of plotting in the evenings after they've finished bird watching for the day. This is a free country, dearie, and we keep ourselves to ourselves on Nantucket. We've no truck with such highfalutin nonsense as kings. Even the president don't bother us much. Live and let live is our motto. And as for Miss Tribulation getting mixed up in such doings, that sounds like moonshine to me. Maybe it does, said Dido crossly. But it's true just the same. You see, she ain't Miss Tribulation. She's only pretending to be her. Who the blazes, said Dr. Mayhew, would want to pretend to be Miss Tribulation Casket? You've been reading too many fairy tales. That's what's the matter with you. Now, you tell me what ails Captain Casket. Deciding that Nate might be a better head at convincing the doctor, Dido abandoned the subject of the Hanoverians and described Captain Casket's symptoms and strange delirious remarks. Dr. Mayhew was very interested in the tale of the pink whale. Is that so? He kept saying. That's mighty interesting. And why shouldn't there be a pink whale now? There's plenty of pink fish, pink pearls, pink shells, pink seaweed in the ocean. Why not a pink whale? And why did she carry on so when she saw Captain Casket? Oh, that's simple enough. Guess she was the little pink whale calf he put back in the sea when he was a boy. He told me that tale once. He found her breech and dragged her back in. And, of course, whales being warm-blooded, warm-hearted, long-lived critters, I've heard of 'em living to a century or more, she'd naturally remember him kindly. They're kin to porpoises, you know, and porpoises are right sympathetic to the human race. Oh, I see, Dido said. Kind of old childhood pals like. Well, we'll be properly in a basket if he wants her to sit by his bed and hold his hand. Let's hope he's a bit better time we get back. Captain Casket did not seem to be much better, though, when they arrived at Sol's Hill. He was wild and feverish, rolled about on his bed, and kept throwing imaginary harpoons at unseen whales. He needs a dose of poppy syrup, Dr. Mayhew said. That'll give him some rest. He administered a draught. Immediately, Captain Casket fell back as if he had been poleaxed and began snoring loudly. That'll fix him for a good few hours, Dr. Mayhew said with satisfaction. Powerful strong it is, the way I mix it. Here, he said to Penn, I'll give ye the bottle, but don't give him any more unless I'm delayed getting back to ye and he seems worse. Now, why don't I drive your mule on to Pulpus, where I want to see old Mr. Pardon, and bring him back tomorrow? That'll save you an extra trip to Nantucket. Aunt Tribulation came into the room. Well, Tribulation, the doctor said, I'd not have known ye, but I suppose we're all getting a bit long in the tooth. Remember when I pushed you in the creek and you were so mad at me? Yes, I do, said Aunt Tribulation frostily, and it's not a thing to boast about. It was not the act of a gentleman. Dr. Mayhew laughed very heartily at this and took his leave, pinching Penn's cheek. As soon as the door closed behind him, Aunt Tribulation turned fiercely on Dido. What do you mean by going to the hidden forest and begging lobsters off the English scientists? Who gave you leave to do such a thing? Oh dear, thought Dido. She met eyes with Penn, who looked anguished. Yes, indeed, I got the whole story out of penitence, rasped Aunt Tribulation, and I won't have such behavior. You are not to pester those men, who are very busy botanists studying the plant life on the island, and have no time to waste on prying, spying children, who ought to be home anyway, tending to their tasks. For that, miss, you shall be shut in the clock, and shall have no dinner or supper. She suddenly pounced on Dido, who, sleepy and off guard after the eventful night and long drive, was no match for her, and was soon thrust into the grandfather clock. Aunt Tribulation slammed and locked the door. Oh, well, Dido thought, yawning. It'll be a chance to catch up on my sleep. She curled herself up comfortably as possible, with her head well below the swing of the pendulum, and prepared for a nap. Then, to her astonishment, she heard Penn crying indignantly like a lamb at bay. Aunt Tribulation, you are unjust. It is wrong to put Dido in the clock. You should not do so. If anybody is put in there, it should be me. It should be I, Penitence, Aunt Tribulation corrected coldly. Hear, hear, shouted Dido from the clock. Silence, you disobedient girl. As for you, Penitence, I cannot shut you in, since you are needed to look after your father. You may give me the milk posset you had prepared for him, since he will not need it at present. No, heat it up first, and polish the parlor floor. Penn's spurt of courage seemed to have died. There was silence for some time. Then she could be heard saying in a subdued manner, Here is the posset, Aunt Tribulation. Dido went peacefully to sleep, lulled by the clock's solemn tick-tock. She was not suffered to sleep for very long, however. The door of the clock suddenly opened, letting in unwelcome daylight, and Penn's excited voice whispered, Dido, Dido, you may come out. Glorious me, Dido murmured, only half awake. What have you done with Auntie Gruff? Dropped her down the well? You could have knocked me down with a feather pen when I heard you speaking up to her so fierce. Oh, but I have done something much, much worse now, whispered Penn, looking quite scared at her own daring. I put some poppy syrup in her milk posset, and she has gone sound asleep on the parlor sofa. Penn, you never! Truly, come and see. Dido climbed stiffly out of the clock, and saw that it was so. Aunt Tribulation was in a deep sleep. Dido, I am truly sorry that she found you had been in the forest. Penn went on hurriedly. I could not bear for you to be thinking that I told on you. Indeed, it was not like that. Never mind, young'un, said Dido. I could see it must have been an accident. It was the lobsters, you see. We forgot all about them, and when she woke up, there they were clambering about the barnyard, and she said, Where did they come from? And I am not clever at inventing things on the spur of the moment, and I said, We had them from a man in exchange for some boots. And she seemed to know about the man and the boots, and so it all came out. You could have said they was from Mrs. Pardon. That would have been a downright falsehood. Oh, Dido said. Yes, I suppose it would, eh? Well, no use chin-wagging over spilt chowder. How's your pa, Penn? Still fast asleep, but I think he looks better. They sat with Captain Casket throughout the afternoon, but he continued to sleep peacefully and never stirred. During this time, Dido took the opportunity of giving Penn a complete account of what had happened in the forest and the conclusions that she and Nate had reached. But she did not mention their suspicions of Aunt Tribulation. She thought the news that Miss Casket might be wanted by the English police would prove too much for Penn's newfound courage. At last, when dusk was beginning to fall, Dido said, Maybe us had better get the job done while Captain Casket's still quiet. Penn agreed that it would be safe to leave her father for a while. As they were feeding the pigs, Penn thought she heard cries from the bottom pasture. Dido, quick, she cried, looking over the fence. There's somebody in trouble down there on the bog. At the foot of the hill was a small cranberry bog, half grown over with bushes and straggly trees. They could hear the cries for help clearly now and see somebody floundering about among the crimson hummocks. I'll go, Dido said, grabbing a long-handled wooden hay rake. You best stay here, Pen, in case your pa wakes. She bolted down the hill, calling, Hold on, I'm a-coming. When she reached the edge of the bog, she saw that the person in distress was little Professor Bredno. He was mired up to his knees, completely stuck. His eyes were bulging with fright, and his ears stood out like wings. Well, you are a clodpole, ain't you, Dido said. However did you come to get into such a pickle? I is hoping seeing birds, seeing Nathern, he explained humbly. Dido crawled out with caution over a fairly safe-looking hummock and extended the rake in his direction. He was just able to grab it. That's the dandy. Hold it between the spikes, Dido said, demonstrating. Now I'm a-going to pull, so when I say heave, you shove off like an old bullfrog. Ready? Heave. She threw herself back, pulling every muscle in her skinny frame. Seemed about to snap. The professor came out of the mud, a reluctant 6 inches, and fell forward onto his knees. Keep it going, don't stop now, don't sink, shouted Dido, throwing herself back again. Heave some more, come on, put a bit of gumption into it, don't pull me in. She dragged him slowly through the mud. If you've lost those boots, I shan't give you half what for. I shan't half give you what for, she added. We had trouble enough over them already. He was so muddy that it was impossible to tell whether he had them on or not. Skrek. Village awful, he exclaimed, looking at himself dolefully, and then politely said to Dido, It is much nick of time, treasure child. Yes, thanks, but don't kiss my hand again, she said, retreating with haste. You better come up and get under the pump. It's lucky Auntie Trib's out for the count. She beckoned him, and he followed trustfully, dropping mud and ooze at every step. Mercy, exclaimed Pen at the sight of him. I'll put on a kettle. Mercy, exclaimed Pen at the sight of him. I'll put on a kettle. Pump first, Dido said grimly. It's us'll have to scrub the kitchen floor if he walks on it in that state. Make him some of your herb tea, Penny. The poor little man submitted meekly to being pumped over. I thank you, he kept repeating piteously. I should just about think you nearly did sink me. Guess you're clean enough now. You can go into the kitchen. She gestured toward the door where Pen had an old suit of Captain Casket's ready. It was far too big for the professor, and they had to kilt it up here and there with lengths of string. He drank the herb tea with loud expressions of appreciation. They gathered it was something he had not expected to find outside his native land. Hajar of her bead, God. Wonder nice. Gratefulness. That's all right, Dido said. Have some gingerbread. Now, we don't want to get into trouble with your friends, but we do want you to tell us about that gun of yours, Professor. Gun? Cannon, pistol, bang, bang. Ah, Kongsbang is soon blowing up London. What? It will be monster shoot. Gross boom across. He looked across the room and saw an old silvery globe of the world on one of the dresser shelves. With a finger, he traced a course on it from the island of Nantucket up over Nova Scotia, across the North Atlantic to London. Is shooting up Palace, St. James Palace, not? Shooting right across the Atlantic, blowing up St. James's Palace. Is that what he means, Pen? Good soul, the professor said, delighted. It's fine shot, not? And it's all mine. Dr. Alextri Bredno. Mine. Mathematic. Calculated. But Professor, blowing up London. London, not. Sommel Kungsblatt. Only the King's Palace, Dido guessed. He nodded. Krupus, that's mighty pretty aiming, I must say. But honestly, Professor, you mustn't blow up the poor old king, must he, Pen? What harm's he ever done to you? No, indeed, it would be very wrong, Penitence agreed. But they seemed unable to convey this idea to the professor. His cleverness, not? He kept saying. Will being magnifibang. He was so pleased with his amazing feat of having made a gun that would shoot right across the Atlantic and hit St. James's Palace that he could not see any wrong in it. "He's looking forward to the bang," Dido said exasperatedly. "Is being thunderboom," he agreed with an eager nod. "And will pushing look so." He made a gesture on the globe with a finger from Nantucket around Long Island to New York Harbor. It took them some time to see what he meant. "You mean," Dido said at last, "that what did you call 'em? The kickback from the shot will push Nantucket right round to that place, New York City?" "Is so," he said in triumph. "Is by it not?" "It certainly is. Just wait till the mayor hears this. It ought to change his notions about not interfering. We keep ourselves to ourselves on Nantucket." Dido couldn't help bursting into a fit of laughter. Then she sobered up. Penn was looking absolutely aghast. "Push Nantucket all that way? But the houses would fall down." "That wouldn't be the half of it, I dare say," Dido said. "Think of the waves. Look, Prof, when's all this due to happen? When bang?" She pointed at the clock on a clock on the calendar. He flew into a complicated explanation. They could understand only about one word in 18. They gathered there with some final calculation to be made, and then he kept saying, "Expect the skip coming." "Oh, I know," Dido said at last. "He's waiting for the ship, the Dark Diamond. She's bringing the cannonball." "So is so," he counted on his fingers. 2, 3 day." 3 days? We've not got much time then. Lucky Doc Mayhew's coming back. And then you sail away in the ship, do you? "Skep awaits Hijir." He demonstrated on the map that the Dark Diamond, having delivered the cannonball, would hurry around to the other side of Cape Cod to avoid any tidal waves caused by the sudden displacing of Nantucket. And when things had settled down, would collect the professor and take him home. "Lucky thing," said Dido with envy. "You wishing with come, I fixing." Penn gave Dido an anxious look, but did not speak. "Oh, goodness," Dido said. "Thanks, Professor, but I can't leave till Penn's fixed up. Anyway, I'd just as soon not sail along with Mr. Slycarp." Or Auntie Trib, she thought. Much obliged for the offer, though. The professor now politely took his leave, indicating that he would return next day to collect his dried clothes. He offered handfuls of golden guineas to the girls, but they shook their heads. "Not if they're your pay for blowing up poor old Kingy," Dido said. Professor Bredno beamed at her uncomprehendingly, kissed her hand again, murmuring, "Excellent, children," and tottered off down the hill. "Well," left alone, the girls stared at one another in amazement. "I said they was a peavy lot," Dido remarked at length. "But I never thought they was as peavy as that, blowing up St. James's Palace, and moving our island without so much as a by your leave." There came a tap at the door. Both girls jumped guiltily, but it was only Nate. "Anyone in?" he said, putting his head round the door. "Say, girls, guess the news. Guess who's coming up? Or guess who's turned up? The Sarah Casket?" Dido wondered if it could be the real Aunt Tribulation, but did not say so. "No, it ain't that. It's the old Pinkin." "The Pink Whale? Where is she?" "Off Squamhead. As plain as plain. She's a-diving and a-playing and a-carrying on like a porpoise. Everyone from Pulpus has been there watching all afternoon. Doc Mayhew's given strict instructions no one's to hurt her. Is Captain Casket awake?" "I'll see," said Penn, and ran upstairs. "He ought to get a sight of her," Dido said. "As soon as he is well enough to get out, I dare say she'd do him all the good in the world." They tiptoed upstairs after penitence. "Papa," she could be heard saying softly, "Papa, are you feeling better?" "Is that thee, daughter? Why, where am I?" "In your own bed at home, Papa." "Why, so I am. I have been having strange dreams," he sighed. To Penn's fright, 2 tears formed in his eyes and rolled slowly down his cheeks. "I dreamed that I had caught up with her at last," he said sadly, "and that she welcomed me." "Who, Papa?" "The Pink Whale. It was but a dream, though." "No, Papa, it wasn't a dream. It was true. And she is waiting for you now off Squam Head. Waiting to see you, so you must hurry and get better." Penn told him joyfully, but his response was disappointing. "I know thee does it for the best, daughter, but thee must not tell falsehoods. There is no Pink Whale. It was but a dream. Why else should I be here at Souls Hill and not aboard the Sarah Casket? I have been ill and dreaming. But, Papa, it was no dream. Other people have seen her too. Nate saw her. It was a dream, he said obstinately, and to himself he added with a groan, Oh, alack! And was the first time a dream, too, the little pink whale calf washed up on Quidnet Beach. Has all my life's search been but a fool's quest for a phantom? But, Papa, truly she is out there now off Squam Head. Indeed she is. 2 more tears stood in Captain Casket's eyes, but he shook them away angrily, hunched his shoulders, and turned his face to the wall. To all Penn's protestations he would merely reply, I do not believe thee. It was a dream. Poor Penn came sadly out to the others. Never mind, Dido comforted her. Maybe Doc Mayhew will be able to convince him tomorrow. You make him some nice porridge or broth or summit strengthening now. Nate'll help me with the butter. While they were churning, Dido quickly told Nate about the abominable plan to blow up King James III in his palace, and the disastrous effect this would have on the island of Nantucket. He whistled in dismay. Heave Nantucket right back against the mainland just so they can swap one king for another. Sounds like plumb foolishness to me. Did you tell the doc? No, Dido said crossly. He wouldn't listen to me. He thinks little girls tell fairy tales. You'll have to tell him tomorrow, Nate. Maybe he'll pay attention when he hears Nantucket's going to end up in New York Harbor. Guess so. I hoped he'd know Aunt Tribulation was a faker, Dido went on. But she turned him round her finger smooth as pie, pretended to remember when he pushed her in the creek. He was fooled. Does Penn know she's really Miss Slycarp? No, Dido said. I ain't told her. Young Penn's not much on play acting. She'd give the whole game away. Oh, well, I'll be along in the morning early before the doc gets here. Night. Nate jumped onto his pony, which he had left tethered in the yard, and kicked it into a canter. Good night, Dido called. She turned back into the dairy to get a pat of butter for supper and stood, still petrified with horror. Aunt Tribulation was there, standing in the shadows behind the oil lamp. The upward slanting light gave her face a most sinister expression. Oh, Dido stammered. I didn't know. That is, I thought you was asleep in the parlor. I was asleep, Aunt Tribulation said menacingly, but I have woken now, as you see, and I have overheard the most curious conversation. As Dido still gazed at her, frozen with indecision. How much had she heard? Would there be time to shout after Nate and warn him? Aunt Tribulation turned her head sharply and said, Ebo, deal with this one, and make no mistake about it. Deal with her for good. A black bag came down over Dido's head, smothering her. And that is the end of Chapter 8.